Alright everybody, it's Virginia Outdoors Unlimited here today, and today I'm doing a video that I've had requested a couple times in the comments, just people asking to see my different pieces of taxidermy. Between me and my dad, I'd say we have about 15 pieces of taxidermy here in our house. Um, and so I'm just going to basically show you all what we have. We can start with what's behind me, so I'll flip the camera around here. And I'm just going to be basically showing you all the pieces of taxidermy and then kind of explaining the stories behind them. Some of these pieces actually have some pretty nice stories behind them. So yeah, stay tuned. Alright, so here's the first piece of taxidermy we're going to discuss. This is a ring perch that I caught on in March of 2006. I actually won Angler of the Month with this ring perch for the state of Virginia. Got a little plaque made here. Actually tells you the river it was caught in, but that's not that big of a deal. But yeah, 1 pound, 6 ounces, 13 inches. And the only thing that's really kind of notable about this is that the fin got broke. This was actually, I need to get this repaired. Up above here, a deer head used to sit. Actually, I'll show you that deer head in a minute. It now sits on my other wall. And it basically came loose from the wall one day and fell down and clipped that ring perch's fin. I'm really lucky it didn't just totally destroy the mount. But it's a really, really beautiful fish. And yeah, I'm really happy to have it in my room. And here is basically, this is just a wall of all of the deer that I've shot in terms of bucks. I've only ever really killed 4 or 5 bucks. This is my biggest deer to date in terms of horn size. It's about a 14-inch spread 8-pointer. I shot it on Youth Day in 2014 or 2013 at about 200 yards. So that was a pretty memorable hunt. And then that's probably my second biggest deer. That's a 6-pointer that I shot. Well, would have been a 6-pointer, but he broke his horn, and I shot him running across the mountain with a shotgun. So yep, we'll move on to the next. Alright, so this is that deer that actually fell down off my wall and broke the ring perch fin. I did not shoot this deer. This deer was shot by my father in the 1990s with a bow. It was his first decent buck that was shot with a bow, so he got it mounted. He actually lost this deer. Like, he shot it and couldn't find it and spent 2 whole days looking for it before he finally found it. He was just telling me that story the other day. I'd never heard the story of this deer. But not a monster buck, but a very decent typical 6-pointer. And I think he got it mounted just because, it was his first with a bow, and it was such a tough deer for him to get and to recover. But yeah, I would have loved to kill this deer. I've never killed anything even close to this big. And yeah, never killed a deer with a bow as well. So definitely things to knock off my list. But yeah, I do like having this deer in my room. We just keep my room because I have space up here. Alright, so sorry, the lighting's really bad in this part of my house. We're just going to have to use kind of natural lighting. This is a like 9 or 10-pointer. It's really it's a 7-pointer, but it has a bunch of stickers on it that my dad shot. I've never heard the story behind this deer. I know he shot it before I was born, so in the 1990s or the 1980s. But it's not really a beautiful rack. I think it's just kind of a different rack is why he got it mounted. It has a ton of stickers coming off this part of the horn, as you can kind of see here. And most of them are a little bit over 1 inch, so they would count as points nowadays. But I do like this mount. We kind of keep it in a part of our house that's not like we have we have kind of our den is where we put is where my dad keeps his nicer deer. So this deer's kind of off to the side, but it is another nice piece of taxidermy. So yeah. So right here are another 3 deer my dad killed. These are probably my dad's 3 biggest deer. So we'll go starting from right to left. That's a big typical 8-pointer my dad shot in the 90s, he shot that deer in the 90s up on a mountain behind one of our family friend's house. Not a huge deer in terms of spread, but long tines. And I really love this deer or this piece of taxidermy because the tines are very curved, and I don't see that on a lot of deer that we shoot. So yeah, definitely a cool piece. A cool deer. As you can see, like I said, not very wide, but the horns also almost come and touch each other, which I think it's a cool piece of taxidermy. Moving on, this is probably my dad's biggest ever deer. There's actually a cool story behind this deer, and as you can see, it has a deformed horn on the right side. it would have been, let me see if I can show you, it would have been a really big typical 8-pointer. As you can see, that left horn is a big typical 8 horn. But we think he got hit by a car or something, and it caused this huge weird horn to grow up. It actually has like a little tine that wraps around the back of it, and it's a bunch of different horns. But my dad, he had been hunting this deer. He missed it during bow season. It came in on him and he shot at it with his bow, and the deer jumped over his arrows, what he says. And he was going out on Thanksgiving to hunt the same area, and he was going to go take his muzzleloader, but he couldn't find the caps for his muzzleloader. He had left them, dropped them in our backyard, and he couldn't find them in the dark. So it being Thanksgiving in Virginia, you can shoot a turkey on Thanksgiving, even though turkey season isn't normally in. So he just grabbed his shotgun and figured he'd shoot a turkey. And he was walking through this thick area to get back to where the turkeys were, and he threw a buckshot in just in case. And he had a teratulsa gland, which is basically a part of the inside leg of the deer that deer pee on to kind of establish dominance and territory. And he had that on, and this deer followed him through the thicket, and he kind of heard it come running up behind him and turned around. And luckily, he had a buckshot in the gun and shot this deer at about 70 yards right when it ran. And he actually had to go up and finish this deer off. He found it, or he ran basically through the woods and found it lying in a ditch and finished off his wife. It has a little nick on its side, but definitely his biggest deer ever, and a pretty cool story. And then this is just a big 10-pointer. I don't know if it's a typical 10 because it has that little G3 right there, but then its other point on the other side is the kicker off the back of the G1. So this is another really nice symmetrical rack deer. And yeah, no real big story about this. I know he shot it. I think he shot it with the bow back behind where he used to live. So we will move on to the next pieces because I need to let my arms take a break. I'm holding them above my head here. So yeah. So it's been kind of the deer show so far. We're finally getting on to some ducks. This is actually a duck that I shot that I had mounted. It was my first ever duck, and it actually has a pretty cool story behind it. Me and my dad were actually deer hunting, and I want to say it was 2011 or 2010. Maybe it was 2009. I don't know. And we were sitting in this ground blind. We just had our deer rifles out, and where we were sitting was basically, it was the bottom of a little cornfield that had a creek running through it. So we had the cornfield above us, kind of up this hill, and then a creek, and then we were sitting on the other side of the creek. And we looked up the creek, and there was a big hole up there that we sometimes had seen ducks in, but we never really tried for them. And we looked up and we saw these ducks sitting up there, and they were kind of floating down the creek. So my dad, basically, we weren't seeing any deer, so we snuck out the back of this big box ground blind. It was a portable one, so we had just set it up, and snuck out the back of it and ran about 300 yards up to our truck and grabbed our shotguns and snuck back into the blind just kind of in time. The ducks were just kind of getting kind of close, and the ducks basically floated down basically to where we were. And if you've ever been in a deer ground blind, there's not much space to shoot out above or below. So we both kind of just had our barrels sticking out of the ground blind. And the creek had a really high bank. So they came floating around the corner, and then we couldn't see them, but we knew they were somewhere in front of us. So we basically just yelled, and it was 7 mallards in total flushed up. And me and my dad both dropped one of them out of a deer ground blind, and this was my duck. Something a little special about it, it has very white wings. Like the fronts of its wings are extremely white for a mallard. Besides that, nothing really special except it was my first duck. And yeah, definitely a duck I'll always remember, and a beautiful piece of work by Frozen and Flight Taxidermy. That's the guy who I have do my ducks, and he does absolutely incredible work. So very, very pleased with this mount. So that day that we killed the mallards was actually not the end of our duck hunting. We were only out there deer hunting, really, and we had our shotguns in the blind now, and we were kind of just sitting there. We just shot the mallards, and we were walking up to pick them up, and we saw this little something basically go up into the hole on the creek above us. And my dad was like, I don't know what that was. I think it's a wood duck. So I was still very young at this point, so he kind of just snuck up there alone, and I heard a shot about, I don't know, 3 minutes later, and he came back holding this thing, and it was a little green-winged teal we shot on basically a tiny mountain creek in Western Virginia. I would have never bet, it was in November too, I would have never bet that that's where my dad would have shot his first green-winged teal. So he ended up getting that duck mounted, so we got 2 ducks mounted from that day. And this was kind of the hunt that got me it wasn't a duck hunt, but it was the hunt that got me hooked on duck hunting. Because to get two different species in such a short time and to have such cool wing shooting, it just absolutely got me hooked. This is another beautiful piece of taxidermy. I love the sitting mount on this duck, and the green wing teal are just beautiful, beautiful birds. So we'll move on to the next ones. All right, so this is the third and final duck that me and my father have mounted. This is actually a duck that I shot that I have mounted. And another kind of cool story behind this one. This was my second duck hunt ever after that hunt well, I guess the deer hunt that turned into a duck hunt. Our family friend invited us out. I think this was the following year after I shot that mallard. Invited us out to his impoundment to go duck hunting. And driving down there in the morning, I still remember to this day, I kind of just brought it up. I was like, Dad, you know what I want to shoot today? I want to shoot a merganser. I had never even seen a merganser before, I think. And I just said, I want to shoot a merganser. I'd been watching a lot of YouTube videos. I think I had seen someone shoot a merganser, and I wanted to shoot one. Of all the duck species I wanted to shoot. It ended up being an incredible waterfowl hunt. We had about, I'd say, at least 60 ringnecks either buzz our decoys or come into our decoys throughout the morning. They let me do a lot of the shooting, and we only ended up with 6 ringnecks. I think we lost an additional couple. And had a chance at some mallards almost, but they ended up flaring. I still remember those. And just about at the end of the morning, we were sitting in this blind at the impoundment, and lo and behold, this big red-breasted merganser just comes gliding in. And they were like, all right, shoot it, Thomas. It was about 40 yards, and I put a headshot in on it and got it back. And my dad was like, okay, what do you want to do with it now? You said you wanted to shoot a merganser, and I said I wanted to get it mounted. But we had just had that mallard done, and he was like, we're not going to pay for another duck to be mounted. So I ended up collecting a ton of driftwood and trading it with a taxidermist to get this duck done. And I really wanted it to be a little bit special, so I had it basically eating this fish. So the taxidermist I had do it basically collaborated with a local fish taxidermist, and yeah, got this little fish to make it look kind of like he was eating a fish on a piece of wood. And definitely a mount that I still very much enjoy to look at every day. Alright, so here is a ring perch my father caught. As you can see, that is an absolute slob ring perch. I think that was a 1 pound, 11 ounce ring perch that he caught. I think in 2006 as well. I think we caught both those ring perch. We got mounted on the same day. This was just an absolute giant ring perch. And this is still in pristine condition. I love this mount. I love the piece of wood that he picked along with the grass that the taxidermist incorporated. But yeah, not too much of a story behind this one, just an absolute giant ring perch. This is the last deer that we're going to be talking about today. This is my father's most recent deer that he got mounted. He was actually hunting down by the river in our local area, and was hunting kind of in the swamp. And he looked across. He was basically hunting about 50 yards from the river. And he looked across, and here this deer was swimming across the entire river. It's a very wide stretch of river where he was down by hunting. And this deer swam all the way across the river and basically got up on shore and walked right under him in his tree stand. And he shot it with a rifle. Or no, shot it with a muzzleloader, I'm pretty sure. But a pretty decent typical 8-pointer. Has a little bit of a messed up horn on this side, but very tall and wide horns. Not a huge deer, actually. It's kind of a typical swamp deer, kind of lean and a little bit skinny, but pretty cool rack and a pretty cool deer. Alright, and so I kind of saved the best for last. This is the final piece of taxidermy we have, and this is actually a replica mount of a about a 95 to 100 pound catfish that my dad caught. It is an absolute giant, and so it's kind of a talking point when friends of ours come over. He caught this fish in September, actually. So it was this exact same length, but it wasn't this fat, the one that he caught. But it was I think a 53 or 54 inch blue catfish, caught it in September. And I still remember he caught it in the morning and came to pick me up because it was dove opening day of whatever year that was. And came to pick me up. And I remember we went back down there and he had tied it off to this dock. The fish was still perfectly healthy. And the fish was ripping the dock out from the poles. This was kind of an old rickety dock, but it was literally just shaking the dock back and forth, and it looked like it was about to rip the dock out. Luckily, we got it up into the live well, went and weighed it. It weighed in at 80-something pounds. This is actually a 100-pound replica. mount that the taxidermist did. But an absolute monster of a fish. And I wish he'd caught it in the spring, because in the spring they tend to be a lot fatter and they tend to eat a lot better. Well, not eat. We released this fish. We wouldn't eat a catfish this big, but they tend to have basically just be more fat, which increases their weight. Give you all a better view. Just an absolute huge mouth on it. Huge fish, and really cool to kind of look at it and talk about. Alright, I hope you all enjoyed this video. I'm just sitting here in the den, as you can see my duck right there. But just kind of something a little bit different today, showing you all the taxidermy we have. I think we have, what, 6 deer in the house now, 3 ducks, 2 ring perch, and a big blue cat. I'd really like, my dad has been catching a lot of big brown trout recently, and I think for his next birthday, if I can get my hands on one of the big brown trout he caught, or some of the pictures, I'd like to get a replica mount of one of the big brown trout that he caught, because they are absolutely beautiful fish. But yeah, that's just about it. Nothing much else to say. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a comment if you have any questions about any of these pieces, any of the stories, anything of that nature. And yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be doing more kind of videos like this. I'm leaving for college tomorrow, so most of my videos will probably be filmed from there on out now. I have a kind of a little bit of a surprise in next week's video. I'm going to be talking about the gear I got for next waterfowl season. So yeah, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.